So he would play the banjo, and my grandpa would play the guitar just to have rhythm. And then I started playing the bass because he said, well, here, I can show you basically three chords, G, C, and D, and we can do all these summer scene things just out of your GCD.
Hi, and welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. If you've ever wanted to learn bass, you should know that right now there are thousands of people inside the For Bass Players Only community. A lot of them over 50. They're learning bass, they're having the time of their life, and they're playing the music that they love. Come join them and experience that incredible transformation for yourself because you're never too old to groove. So let's play bass. My guest this week is Wayne Brewer. Wayne is a sixth generation brewer. I don't mean a brewer, I mean, that's his family's name. It's Brewer. His dad, Gary Brewer, is founder and leader of the highly acclaimed and very popular bluegrass group Gary Brewer and the Kentucky Ramblers, which plays their own style of American roots music they call Brewgrass. I love it. Formed in 1980, the Grammy nominated family band has performed extensively in all 50 states, Canada, and Europe. And you're going to love hearing Wayne tell his story. He started his musical career at the age of 18 months. 18 months. He's in the Guinness Book of World Records as the youngest recording artist, and he also has the distinction of being the youngest artist ever to perform on the Grand Ole Opry stage. In addition to bass, Wayne is a mean, self-taught country fiddle player, and he also happens to be a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo. This is his first time on For Bass Players Only. Welcome, Wayne.
Hello, John. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
Just wonderful, man. We're just getting settled back in as you are from getting back from the NAMM show out there in Los Angeles and Anaheim area. And
Yep.
we're glad to be home, but boy, that was something to see and something to experience for sure. It's the first time I've been out there. It's really massive.
I think my first time was like 1990 or 91. And I did take a break after I got married and started raising a family and running the family business and all that. Then I started creeping back in around 2011, and I've been going every year since, except this was the first time I'd been since 2020 because of
Right.
the pandemic. But you've got such a great story. You've been involved in music in some capacity virtually your whole life. What is your earliest memory being exposed to music? How far back does your mind go?
Well, honestly, John, probably when you was talking about the Guinness Book of World Records thing where I was on the Grand Ole Opry, um, I actually do remember that back then. It's odd things that you remember and things that you don't. You know what I'm saying? But um, that it was the first time I'd ever broke a string. Um, so basically, what I had when I played when I was that little, and I've actually still got it sitting right in the other room there, but um, it's a little guitar, but it's a custom built thing. A friend of mine was he owned a music shop and he was a luthier, and he took it and basically made a mandolin, if you'll have it. So it's got mandolin strings on it, but it looks like a guitar. And so that's what I was playing. And I remember, coming out there. And of course, all I remember about it was, it was real, everything was real dark. And they had like, best way I can explain it was like a big camera on almost like a jig lift thing that kind of extended towards the stage. And when it extended towards me, I'm of course very young, and I had been on stage before, but I'd never experienced nothing like that. So here, this camera on this contraption is, so I thought, coming right in, at me on the stage. And of course, I backed up 3 or 4 steps, and they were like, "No, it's okay." And so I do remember that, of all things, just the camera coming at me on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. They were filming it back then. It was on TNN.
How old
And
were you?
what's that?
How old were you at that time?
That was 18 months old when I done that. Yeah,
Oh, that you
that was
remember
that.
that at 18 months?
I do remember that. And then I just thought that was I don't know how to explain, but that and then right after that, I got back into what I was doing and I was beating the guitar so hard, I guess it popped one of the strings. And so in other words, I both of those were kindly things that scared me at the time because I was like didn't really know what was going on. So broke my first string at the Opry and then got scared by the camera coming at me.
I
So
think you recovered well. You seem to be pretty secure about the whole thing these days.
yeah, it's people ask me about it different times and at different interviews through the years as I've grown up in music and whatnot. And things are just to me, it was normal. You know what I'm saying? So I never did have. That's what people don't understand when they ask adults that's maybe been in it since they were teenagers, their whole life prior to getting into music. They have a comparison, but I really don't because it's all I've ever really known was music. So, it was normal for me. The thing that's always been kindly odd to me, again, people ask a lot and different things. And in other words, I don't have, like you said, that comparison to compare it to. But what is kind of weird for me is like, and it was worse when I was younger because now, of course, I'm not in school and things like that. But when I was real young, even in school, um, I remember telling my preschool teacher, her name was Miss Hankey, and I was basically I had went a whole lot with my dad, and mom would always go with me when I was real young, of course. And so something come up, and dad had to go, and I was in preschool now, so I didn't get to go on the trip. So I was distraught, that I didn't get to go with the boys on the trip. So mom dropped me off and stuff at school, and I cried, the whole time. And the old gal there, Miss Hankey, was, "What's wrong, honey?" And I said, "Well, my dad's on the road," and I couldn't even talk plain, and she said, "Well, what, it's okay." And I said, "You don't understand, Miss Hankey." I said, "I've been on the road all my life," which I had, but they didn't. And so as I grew up, different ones, where they ask you like, well, what's your favorite sport or what's your hobby or what do you like to do? And I'd say something about music and different times, which that's why I think it's important to not cut anybody off or anything like that. When you ask them something, let them speak. Because even though I was a little kid, I had different teachers tell me, like I was making that up or something. And then turns out, like when they asked my parents, they're like, "No, that's actually true. He does go and play, and he's been on this stage and done that." So, just because it sounds far fetched, don't mean that it's not true.
Yeah.
So that's been the hardest thing, John, is uh, growing up like this, and then sort of just like what we just experienced last week. You go out there, um, all matter of big stars that you meet and hang out with, while you're out there. And we had Luke Spiller, which was the front man of the Struts, a big rock band. They was recently on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, showed up at our Los Angeles debut show out there and just was backstage. And I looked up and he was standing there, and we just hung out for 2 hours and talked. I'm talking about everything from which I'm young. I'm actually turning 29 on the 8th here, so Thursday. But so most of the time, guys my age, they don't really go very deep into the music history, no matter what genre. As you said, I'm always been based in bluegrass and American roots and country flavored music, but I was always encouraged from early age by my dad, which is odd to a lot of people because most of the time, people that's in the types of music I just described, they don't like rock, and they don't like, in other words, you know what I'm saying? They're inclusive a lot of times, and I think that is a downfall, honestly, because and I've learned that as I've grown up, because you'll have different ones say, "Oh, uh, this ain't no count or that ain't no count, only what we're doing," and so my dad always encouraged me to uh, broaden my horizons in music and genres. And, he would tell me, "Oh, there's this band that I loved when I was growing up called Kiss. And there's this band,
Your dad said that?
yeah, man, he's a big Kiss fan, believe it or not. And, Deep Purple and CCR and all these, old vinyl records that he'd give me when I was probably, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years old. And so I'm listening to Bill Monroe and Ralph Stanley and this and that. And then all of a sudden, at my, early teenage years, he's introducing me to Kiss and AC/DC and Led Zeppelin and all the ones I just mentioned, but then also George Jones and Mel Street and, all these country stars too. So, very vast amount of um, musicality and genres that I wouldn't have been exposed to at my generation. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Unless,
yeah. If I can just cut in here, because
yeah,
there's a
absolutely.
question I was going to ask you. It was one or two questions down, but I will ask you now. First of all, I think that is amazingly cool that your dad exposed you to all of that, and not like what I was going to ask you is, okay, bluegrass, growing up in Kentucky, sixth generation, all of that stuff. But at some point, I would imagine that, you're just a kid. You're a kid in junior high school. In high school, you have friends. They're into music. And I was going to ask you about the music of the day. Did you discover some of that on your own in addition to what your dad exposed you to?
I did. And it's funny that you said it like it was kindly, honestly, I guess around uh, third, fourth, or fifth grade. So my last few years of elementary school, because I had always been based around what I grew up with, which was the bluegrass and American roots and country flavored, I call it music, Americana, all of it's American roots style music. And my great grandfather worked with the original Carter family in the 20s. So that's kindly how the lineage went. But ironically enough, um, my dad's story was kind of similar to mine, as he was into rock when he was younger, and he got in an accident and got run over by a car. Long story short, and so he was laid up in the hospital in a body cast. They wouldn't let him play electric guitar, so my grandpa brought him in acoustic flat top Martin, and he started playing all these songs that he didn't really know that he knew just from hearing them, and that's how he kindly snowballed into having his own career in bluegrass. Well, fast forward to me, I was always, of course, surrounded by the bluegrass and all that. And like I said, at third, fourth, and fifth grade, I've done been uh probably to, I don't even know how many. I'm talking 30 or 40 or 50 festivals each year. You know what I'm saying? That we were going to. So but
Playing
it
at or attending as a fan in the audience?
performing,
Performing.
and being with them. In other words, when I was young,
You know how unbelievable that is?
well, that's what when I was young, the way that they done, because you got to understand the mind span of a child. You know what I'm saying? In other words, they
I
don't
don't
have.
understand that, but go
So
ahead.
we would we would go out there and they would have me up for a couple songs, on an hour set,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much was the gist of it for till I was on up 7, 8 years old. Then around 7, I finally talked my mom into letting me go with the boys by myself without her, because it wasn't cool then. It's 7, 8 years old to have mom tagging along. So anyway, back to the other that you mentioned. Around third, fourth, and fifth grade, I I was sort of rummaging around down in the basement and found an electric guitar down there, and without permission, and I opened it up and started and found an amp and started fooling around on it. So then when Dad come home, He was like, now, you ain't supposed to touch any of these instruments without asking, because, I was young, and all of his are, real high dollar instruments. And I said, well, I really want to play around on this electric guitar. I don't know why. I just, something different. So, like I said, a lot of people that I have talked to and friends with and stuff, if in similar situations to mine with having family in bluegrass and country and American roots music, their parents had encouraged them the opposite way. Oh, no, you don't want to fool with that old electric guitar and, things like that. Well, instead, my dad did the opposite and said, "Yeah, man, here you go." And he gave me a couple, a distortion pedal and a couple different things. And said, "Here, man, here you go, have at it." And I wasn't playing anything; I was just noodling around on it. Well, then that kindly sparked interest with me, and, John, previous to that, I was just sort of strumming around on the little mandolin guitar thing, as a cutesy thing. You know what I mean? People liked it, and it was, but, I wasn't playing, at a professional level, of course, you know what I'm saying? But I was singing on key, which I think is cool now looking back. But so at that point, I actually started playing for real on the electric guitar, which is very odd because I was used to the mandolin, you see. And so Dad come and he would say and show me some things on the guitar, and I would do them, and then smoke on the water. You know what I'm saying? You start out with these real basic things, Iron Man, and all these real basic, uh, but yet legendary riffs. And he would show me them, Cat Scratch Fever, a lot of stuff out of the A position, that I could do, because these were grown up guitars and I was still, my fingers couldn't really reach the way I wanted. So that went on for, I don't know, a month or so, I guess. And it rolled around to my birthday. And he, the long story short of it was, he gave me one of his guitars, or was letting me use one of the electric guitars, and I had got with a friend of mine at school that played drums. And so we had a band, which it really wasn't a band with two people, but we called it a band anyway. So I was the guitar player and he played the drums. So we got together and jammed a couple times, and just was having a good time playing the Kiss stuff and AC/DC and all the good stuff, Judas Priest, all the good stuff. And so we decided, heck, man, we're gonna play in the talent show at school. And so Dad said, "Yeah, that's a great idea." And that's what I'm saying. So it's kind of cool because a lot of people would have probably said, "No, man, you're a professional. You don't need to play in a talent show." But he was always like, "Yeah, man, that's cool." So we decided we was going to do the talent show. Well, I go up there to we do the audition like the next day at school, on the little stage there in the cafeteria for the talent show. And I done brought the guitar that he was letting me use and my amp up there, the big amp, a big 410 Marshall cabinet, because I wanted it
Oh,
to be loud,
you were the coolest kid in school, man.
Yeah. So like I said, this is like fourth grade. So and then my buddy there, he had full drum kit, pearl kit, because his dad played, so he used his dad's pearl kit. So I mean, we actually were playing really good, but neither of us wasn't singing at that point. We was too afraid to kind of sing, or I don't know if it was we was too afraid to, or we just couldn't do it at the same time and play. But nevertheless, so he showed up. My dad did, uh, the tryout thing for the talent show with a Squire Fender Mini, the smaller guitar, because see, it was easier for me to reach, and so he went and bought me one of them, and I was like, "Oh man, cool!" So I played that on that, and we got in the talent show, and um, the long story short on that, we ended up, and we never did even play the talent show, because me and this guy, my buddy there, we got, I've always, as you can tell, been a talker. So we got in trouble between then and the talent show for, uh, whatever you want to call it, basically just talking in class. And we were talking about music, see, you know, And you know how it is when you're a kid. We was planning out our whole talent show little thing in the stage and all the stuff. In other words, we got in trouble for that and ended up, long story short, they wouldn't let us play in the talent show.
That's
So
pretty harsh punishment for
well,
talking.
yeah, it was. That's one of the reasons I ended up, and we ended up soon after that. They ended up putting me in homeschool because basically I was getting all A's and this and that and the other, but the teachers and the principal and everything, they were having my parents come to school to have meetings almost every week because, well, he's talking too much and he's wanting to do, this and that with music and this and that and the other. And Dad's like, man, to me, all this is positive stuff. If you're not giving him enough stuff to challenge him enough where he's done with his work and it's an A and he's just sitting there twiddling his thumbs. I mean, what's he going to do? He's got to talk, got to do something. So, anyway, soon after that, we ended up getting homeschooled, thank goodness, and then I never looked back. But anyway, the point is that was really cool. And when I basically, as a whole, what I want to tell you is uh, I think Dad knew that if I started experimenting with the other genres, see, in other words, me learning electric guitar, which sounds silly, but it's just the way it is. Me learning electric guitar really helped me musically with the mandolin, believe it or not. And it also helped me with the bass, which I hadn't even got to doing yet. Okay, this was before I was playing bass. So it's kind of funny how that works because then all of a sudden, like in my mind, when I'd be playing mandolin, I was like, oh, this note right here is the same as this note on the guitar. And it just somehow helped me overall. And I've found that more and more true, and everybody's different, everybody learns different. But I've found the more that I experiment on different instruments and different genres, it helps me on other genres and projects that you wouldn't even suspect, if that makes sense.
What about the bass? Were you drawn to the bass, or were you in a situation like so many others? You were ordered to learn how to play it, or was it somewhere in between? How did you become a bass player?
Yeah, it was out of necessity. John, what happened was, I'm trying to think here. Fast forward till I was about, I guess, 12 years old. Okay. And at the time, my dad was doing things in Louisville here, where we're based in Louisville, Kentucky, with the mayor's office, and it was called the mayor's summer scene in the summer, and then mayor's winter scene in the winter. And what that was anything that the city had funding in, whether it was an old folks home, whether it was a like Home of the Innocents, which is a thing where young little children that have health and birth defects and stuff uh, are, and churches, and anything that the city had outreach in, charitably. Okay, they would pay my dad and his group, and he had a group that was here locally that he done those with, and then Thursday through Sunday ish is mainly when the tour and stuff was for festivals, and that's when he took his road band and went and we traveled. But so basically, it was just basically a play pretty, but we really made good money, while we were just in town not doing nothing else. So we done that for he done it for over 20 years, and I got in just on the tail end of it, maybe the last 6 or 7 years of it. Okay. And some of these we would do 3 shows a day, like up to 3 shows, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, depending on the road schedule, and then jump in the bus and go everywhere. So basically, my dad's always been a guitar player in the band and the lead singer. So on these, because they were kind of just a play pretty deal, we basically just done a big jam session, like a free for all thing. So my dad, just out of necessity, would play the banjo because the banjo, we were doing these acoustically. So the banjo's real loud, you know. And so he would play the banjo, and my grandpa would play the guitar just to have rhythm. And then I started playing the bass because he said, well, here, I can show you basically 3 chords, G, C, and D. and we can do all these summer scene things just out of your GCD.
Excuse me, you're playing electric bass, upright bass. What we
Upright.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, you
So,
don't just pick up an upright and know how to play it.
well, he showed me, the G, C, and D, and this was just off the cuff one day. I'm telling you, he was just like, okay, you thump this. I had timing, which is the most important thing, I feel like. And so he's like, you do that, and then before you switch chords, you double this G, and then you go to C, and before you go back, you double the C, and then you double the G, and you go to the D, and back and forth. And that's just very basic, which a lot of these were. We were playing things to lift people's spirits that were having rough times, like uh, simple stuff, You Are My Sunshine, and Mountain Dew, and all these, simple folk songs is what basically folk or bluegrass, and people loved them. So, in other words, it wasn't very hard to do, So I got doing that, and I mean, every day we was doing it. Time I'd done 2, 3 shows a day, I was really getting, it was exciting to me at that point. So I'm like, yeah, man, this is cool. Other than the fact that I kept having to tape my fingers because I was getting blisters, because I'm trying to play loud because there's no amplification at that point. I was playing upright acoustically. So that went on for probably a season.
Well,
Okay.
where did your dad go out and buy you a bass? Did a bass just appear somehow? Where
He
did that?
had he had and I've still got it to this day. It's a 1946 K, and they've always called it the Rambler bass because they always kept it in the bay of the bus in case whichever bass player didn't have one, they'd use the old standby, which was the Rambler bass. So he got that bass out because what the deal was, the guy that he had supposed to do it was unable to do it for whatever reason. So he just pulled the bass out and said, "Here, man, you can do this for today, and we'll get through it. You just thump through it and make sure you're in time." And then, I did decent, not knowing what I was doing. And then after that, he showed me more and more, and so I started taking over the bass playing for the summer scenes, you know, but still not in the road band. He still had his own grown up bass player that was a professional guy in Nashville in the road band because so I hadn't even inquired and didn't even really care anything about doing anything in the road band at that point because I was just playing and having fun. Well, this went on for about a season, and then we were sitting there, and he got a call from his road bass player at the time, and he said, "I need whatever weekend, 4 months from now or 2 months from now, whatever it was, not very long, but maybe within a month or two from when we was sitting there, off because he was going to a friend of his wedding, or maybe his wedding. I don't know, somebody's wedding." And so, I'm sitting there, and again, I mean, I'm 12, about to be 13 years old at the time, and he got off the phone with him, and I said, "Hey, who you going to use?" Because, I'm getting better at the time, and I'm thinking, man, hey, I can do this. If I can do this, I can do this. And so he said, "Well, I don't know. And I'll probably call this one or that one or the other." And so I said, "Well, what about me? Can I do it?" And he said, "Well, uh, no, you can't do it." Or he didn't say it like that. He said, you could do it, but I don't think, you're at the level that I need you to be playing along with other bands that is our caliber that we're playing along with, Ricky Skaggs and this one and that one. You got to be at a certain sort of level to hold up what he, you know, has tried to maintain as a standard for his music. And I said, well, what if I could learn the stuff by then and I learned it to where it satisfied you? Then if I did, and if it
For you.
did, would
Good
you
for you.
would you let me do it? And he said, yeah, if you can get them where that I say that it's good enough, then yeah, you can do it. But I just don't think you'll be able to do it in that amount of you know. So to me, it was like a challenge. And I said, well, what songs do you want to play? And he said, well, that's the problem. He said, I don't do set list, and he never has. So he said, and he plays upwards of 80 to 90% of original material. So in other words, he said, I want to be able to just do like I do with anybody else that plays with me and just start playing a song and they know which one it is and start playing. That way he kind of like caters the songs to what the crowd is doing, depending on where you're at and what you're doing. So I said, well, you can't make me just a sort of a list of ones you think you might do. And he said, I ain't done that for nobody else, so I'm not going to do that for you, you know. So I said, okay, well, that's fair. So anyway, I started into learning these. And at the time, he had around 30 different albums in his catalog, of music. So I had them all on my computer. I've listened to them all my life, but I'd never really tried to play bass on them because, again, we wasn't doing his original stuff on this other stuff I was playing. So I tried to start, and again, at that point, I'm really just barely mastered the GCD situation, and, these are, uh, everything in its mother. And then, I could nail a lot of them that was in open chords, but, you get to ones like that's in B or B flat or something where you're having to note the entire song, man, in my hands, I was like, oh, man, you know, so I was like, well, maybe I bit off more than I could chew. But anyway, I would do the best I could, and then I would get to certain points and I couldn't tell, like I knew there was a note that I wasn't getting and I couldn't find it. So when he would come home, I would say, hey, how's this? How's this? And I'd play it. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, you got that one. That's perfect. Or you got all of it, but this one part you're missing, you're going straight from here to here. And there's another chord here that you're not hitting. And here it is. So I pretty much done that day and night for whatever the month or two, okay, that we did. And a lot of these songs are not easy songs, looking back on them. But anyway, the long story short, I'm trying to condense it, but the long short of it is I learned all the songs. And, and then he said, well, in other words, you can do it. So, um, and I didn't know if it was just going to be for that one show or if, I wasn't doing it with the ideal of, hey, I'm going to take over the other guy's spot forever. I was just wanting to see if I could actually pull off the one show. You know what I'm saying? So basically, his band come in and we all get on the bus. And the one guy had been with him a long, long time. His name was Larry Beasley. And he'd played with Bill Monroe. He'd played with Carl Story, all these legendary people. And then he played with my dad for probably 15 years. And he said, who's running the bass with us this weekend? Because there wasn't a bass player there, it's just me. And Dad said, well, Wayne's going to play the bass this weekend. And he looked at me and he looked at my dad and he said, okay. And they never did nobody say nothing else about it. Well, then we got up there, I tune up, and everything. And, basically Dad said, okay, we're going to kick off with this song. And here, let's kick it off real quick one time, make sure you're catching it. Because all I had played with at that particular point was the computer, the CD on the computer. I hadn't played with any of them in person ever. So we done the kickoff and I caught it. He goes, all right, that's great. That's all we need to know. And then we got up on stage and we done it. And I got to tell you, John, I didn't miss one note on the whole show. And don't misunderstand me. I've missed plenty of notes since then. Okay. But, but on that particular one, see, I wasn't singing or anything. And I was just concentrating fully on the bass, which was great. And so what happened, that was in Arkansas. And I've actually got that on a little, whatever you want to call that, the little small tape, on a video camera from back in the day that you put in the bigger tape to go in the VCR. I've got that somewhere, but God only knows where it's at. But anyway, so that there was the first show that I done, you know, actually sort of standing on my own, playing in a professional person's spot with Dad. And then basically after that show, he said, in other words, if you want to play bass from now on, then you can. And I just won't hire the other guy back. And I said, all right. And I have ever since. So soon after that, 5, 6 years after that, my brother started coming into the band and playing mandolin. So he pretty much done the same thing with the fiddle player. He sort of replaced him as the mandolin player. Well, the problem with that was the fiddle player was the tenor singer. So then now all of a sudden, because my brother don't sing tenor, so now all of a sudden we don't have a tenor singer. So he said, "Hey, you've got a high voice, and you're a natural tenor singer, so you need to start singing tenor and playing the bass." So that's where the real challenge come in, because it's really hard to, or I have found that it was hard at first to play and sing at the same time for
Yes.
me, because I don't know. It's just, in other words, a lot of the other band members, like the banjo player and the fiddle player, when they would come in the way that his music is, when the my dad and the two other guys would come in to sing three-part harmony on the courses, all these songs, they would not play. They would just grab the fiddle like this and grab the banjo, come in to where the harmony is real strong, and the only thing that keeps going is the guitar rhythm and the bass. So see, I have to keep that going and sing at the same time, and then fighting with the big old bass that's 10 times my size, trying to get into the mic and all that. So that was a lot of trial and error through the years, and I ended up doing other things to sort of make that more comfortable for me to do.
Gotta
Uh,
tell you
and
though, that
yeah,
period, that month or two or four or whatever it was, that is the best thing that could have happened to you for your
oh
music,
yeah,
because you wouldn't
absolutely.
have gotten into it so intensely. I want to ask you, because you've been talking about playing the upright bass, and I noticed that I've watched a lot of your YouTube videos in the last, getting ready for this interview. Yeah, love your band. I love the sound. It's just, I didn't grow up listening to a lot of country music, but when I hear your band, that is just feel good music. I just love it. But I noticed that you're playing an NS design upright.
Yeah,
You're not playing, an actual great big uh,
right.
bass violin, a double bass. So it seems at first like it might be kind of an unusual choice for the NS design, but you make it work so beautifully. So talk to me about that.
Well, I got to tell you, man, Ned Steinberger is, I mean, there ain't enough good things that a guy can say about him. He's an innovator. You know what I'm saying? And that's the simplest and quickest way that we could put it, because I could talk just about him and Corey and them guys for hours. But the man's a genius, and I don't care if he lived 10 lifetimes, he'll never get out all of his ideals. And you know what I'm saying? I told him that this last weekend up there. And it's just amazing to me every time I see him. He's come up with 100 more things, and it's like, man, it's just absolutely unbelievable. So I'll tell you how that got started. I played like I said, the upright 46K, which is kind of the holy grail to this type of music. Everybody that, if they're playing an upright acoustic, typically they're playing a K or an American standard, but the one of the biggest ones that everybody is sort of sought after is the K. So I played it for a long time, and nobody taught me any of this stuff. I had to sort of experience it. And my dad wasn't a bass player. He did teach me how to play bass, okay, and he's taught a lot of his previous, because he was kind of famous for doing sort of what I was telling you about me. Like one time, this guy come, and he was an accomplished mandolin player and tenor singer, and he wanted to join the band. And my dad said, uh, you can't play the mandolin. And he said, you're a bass player. And he said, you're a bass singer. And so he hired him, but he put him on the bass and singing bass, and he was one of the best bass players and bass singers he ever had, in his words, except for me. So he just seen that these guys were talented multi instrumentalists, and he put them where he needed them to be. You know what I'm saying? But the point is, with this bass situation, he did teach me how to play the bass, but I had to kind of learn all the ins and out of all this off the cuff, because, like I said, I come in at a really interesting and exciting time. in the music or era, I guess you could say, in bluegrass. So what I mean by that is, and your listeners and viewers will probably appreciate this because people don't cover it a lot because it's a touchy situation with bluegrass, especially because everybody, like I said, they're purists is what people call them, like they're real traditionalist and all that. So it's almost like it's sacred or whatever. So what the deal is, there's always been a lot of um, kind of like back and forth of what is and what's not acceptable. Uh, and it's got better since I've been playing, but I'm saying, especially right when I first started, in other words, about what is and ain't acceptable about, okay, never an electric bass is allowed like this, okay? And then even upright basses like I had, like the K, no pickups on them. You know what I'm saying? Everybody wanted the big thing for, I mean, decades and decades and decades with a bass upright was just you take a daggone piece of acoustic foam and you wrap it around a 58 ball mic, a Shure SM58, and you shove it down in the tailpiece, and uh, basically there that's all you get. So in other words, really all you're getting in the PA is a thump, you know. Well, I'm younger and I'm like, man, the bass, this is a great bass, and this bass sounds like $1 million, the K, but it sounds like crap on the PA because it's just thumping. It's about like a fart, just and you got the rattling going on, you know what I'm saying? It just sounds terrible. And I'm listening to all these high-end bands, and I'm like, man, this is just not, I just don't like this, and then so I talked to my dad about it. He's like, well, basically it's been like that for, you know, all these years ever since they invented bluegrass, pretty much. And, so in other words, sort of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I kind of let that rest for a couple years. But then as things, like I said, in this period that I'm maturing as I'm performing and going around the country and playing, and then not just playing bluegrass, we got into playing more country festivals too, but we were still playing bluegrass on a country festival. And then you see these other setups that these other people have on the bass and pickups and all this. And I'm like, man, that sounds traditional and it sounds natural to the bass, but man, it sounds like $1 million. In other words, okay, here's what the point is. The goal that I was looking for is I wanted to still keep the punch of a upright acoustic and still keep the where you can hear and distinguish the note where it's not muddy, but also have some sustain and be able to hear the fullness and the richness of it. So basically what I'm saying is I was trying to attain the sound that I could get in the studio on the upright bass live with the upright bass, which is a whole lot harder than it sounds, okay? Because because of what I said, and it's almost, in my experience, it's basically impossible to do micing it live because the louder that you turn it up to where you actually get it to where you want it, you're getting feedback, and it's totally impossible to do if you have wedge monitors, which it was 90% of the places we were playing at the time. But like I said, John, things have really come a long way since then, and now we all use the in-ear monitors, and that makes a world of difference because you can crank things louder, not have all the frequency issues. So a lot of things have helped that, but basically, I still played that upright acoustic K for over a decade, and then eventually I talked to a friend of mine and decided to put I decided to put two different pickups on the acoustic upright. So I could get the volume I was wanting. Basically, we weren't getting the volume of the bass that I was wanting, the drive and the punch live, because as soon as I'd tell the sound guy to turn it up, everything would start squealing. So we were having issues every time. So um, I got I'm trying to think of what it's called, the Full Circle, which is a Fishman,
Yeah.
which I endorse them. proud endorser of Fishman products. So it's the one with the two little wheels, that go on the adjustable bridge. So I got that on there. Then I also have the I can't think of what in the world that's called, but I will circle back to that before this is done. But um,
How did you discover NS design?
well, that's what I'm getting to. I done this for a little while, and I love the sound of it. Okay, I love the plugged in sound because again, you have the sustain of like an electric bass and the fullness, but you also still have the punch. So I was really liking that. Then all of a sudden, uh, the thing I hated about the K all those years, and you can look back on pictures, this bass is massive, and I'm like 12, 13, 14, and I'm not a big guy even now, you know. So this bass, I'm the smallest guy in the outfit, and I've got the biggest instrument, okay? So that was hard enough. Then when I started plugging that in, now I've got a bass and a big amplifier, okay? And so I'm like, this is just getting goofier and goofier on me having to carry all this stuff. So somewhere along that same time that I got the bass plugged in and I'm carrying an amp now too, I started playing the fiddle. So then I've got a backpack fiddle case on. I've got an amplifier in this hand. And I've got the upright bass that I'm holding by the bridge, and I'm too short to actually pick it up, so I'm having to lean forward. So it was a nightmare. So basically, we were getting ready to go to Europe, and um, this was maybe 6 or 8 months before we was planning to go to Europe. So about 2018, okay. And I had uh, seen the NSs around because I had been looking for other things that suited my needs better, but I just hadn't really had the opportunity to actually play one. So a friend of mine, um, basically what happened was I had to have some work done on the upright K. So while it was and we were playing every single week at the time. So I said, I need this thing done as quick as possible because I need to play it. And I didn't have another bass at the time. So a friend of mine said he's got probably 30 vintage upright acoustic basses. He collects
Wow.
them.
You
And
must live
so
in a big house.
we call him Bass Mart. Instead of Walmart, we call him Bass Mart.
I love it.
And so anyway, he's a good dude, and he said, "Hey, any of them you want to use, just come pick up whichever one." So, and ironically, he actually performed with my dad for years, so he knows who we are and trusts me and everything. So I said, "Well, I appreciate that, but I said I actually seen you had an NS, and I would like to try it out because if I like it, I want to take one of those. I'm going to buy one and I want to take it to Europe instead of, because I definitely wasn't going to take the K over there."
Yeah.
So he said, "Yeah, man, absolutely." So he dropped it off and I just fell in love with the thing, man. I absolutely loved it. And this was
Four
before,
string, I assume. Four
what's
string.
that?
Four string, I assume.
Four string. It was the CR version, so the kind of the real high dollar version, and it was black with gray like tiger stripes. That flaming maple stuff that he does. And beautiful, beautiful instrument. And so basically, like I said, this is before I met Ned, before I met Corey. I basically fell in love with the thing, man. And I was like, holy cow, this is a next level game changer. I can actually get to the mic right here, and the bass is not so bulky. I can let go of the bass without it falling over because it's on a stand and grab my fiddle and play. I mean, it was just a total game changer for my situation.
And
Okay.
who cares what the bluegrass purists think? Huh?
Well, here's the deal. Here's what happened on that, because at this point I'm still thinking in my mind, because you got to understand what I'm saying. My dad was always a traditionalist, but he also sort of pushed the boundary of tradition. Always, he was kind of right on the teeter totter edge of both.
A
Okay,
traditional bluegrass player who exposes his son to Kiss records and Deep
right.
Purple.
Right. Because I mean, like he recorded an Elvis song and it went on the bluegrass charts, like "Are You Lonesome Tonight?" Okay. So I mean, in other words, but see, everybody's always considered him very traditional bluegrass, and he is, because he come up and performed and toured with Bill Monroe He with Ralph Stanley, with Jim and Jesse, with Jimmy Martin, the first generation, and he's actually the last guy that recorded with Bill Monroe. Bill recorded on his record, and that was Bill's last commercial recording. And Bill was cutting for MCA at the time, and Dad owns that master. So MCA's tried to buy that over and over and over, but Bill told my dad and made him promise that he would not sell it to him. Now, I don't know what that was about, but obviously he wasn't on very good terms. Bill wasn't with MCA, and he didn't want him to have it. So he's never sold it. So anyway, long short is he is looked at as kind of a traditional guy, and for years his kind of his thing, they called him the voice of tradition. That was his kind of thing. So I didn't want to cause any issues with what I was saying because, like I said, when Ralph Stanley booked my dad the first time back in the late 70s and early 80s, my dad at that time, his bass player had one of these back in the day, had like a P bass on his first album. It was cut with one of these. And so when Ralph hired him the first time to come to his festival, he told him, he said, hey, he called my dad Stretch. That's his nickname. He said, Stretch, he said, I want to have you come up to McClure there and play at the festival, but he said, leave that electric bass at the house. So in other words, that was the way it was back then. They would not let them at certain ones of these festivals. And now you can do whatever you want. I mean, they've got drum kits and everything else. It's a total different world. But I'm talking about
That was
then.
your dad was cool with you, first of all, putting pickups on the upright bass, and
Well, that's what I'm telling you. That we had a whole lot of conversation about it.
who did most of the talking?
Well, to both facets, in other words, I was telling him why that I wanted to do it and asking his opinion, and then he would tell me his opinion, but also understand what I was saying. So basically, anybody with ears could hear what I'm saying. In other words, I said, "Hey, man, I want it to sound like right here on this record that we just cut, but here's the live video of what we just played last weekend. Now listen to the difference." And I said, this will help get that more like that. Well, he agreed. But he also said, at the same token, this one and that one and all these ones that he's performed with, including himself, all these years, this other has worked. So in other words, we just kindly went back and forth. And then long story short, he said, well, if you want, get one and do it, and we'll try it out. And then if you don't like it, you just don't use it. You know. And so we got it, and I started using it. We both loved it because he could hear the bass, and so could I. And it was just totally different ball game. And so we were both happy with it. Well, basically, with going into the NS, he let me play this one I borrowed from this guy because I didn't have no other choice. And it was just a small show that we played that on. And I told him, I said, man, I love that thing. And he said, well, yeah, man, it's awesome. He said, it sounds just exactly the same as your upright plugged in. And I said, exactly. But it don't have the great big old, it ain't so big and all the things we know. And it breaks down into a little old, you put it on your shoulder. I mean, it's just, there's so many good things about it. So I said, well, I may get one at some point. He said, well, yeah, yeah. And that's all there was to that conversation. So then my other bass come back from the shop the next week, and I played it for another couple of months. Well, then I went to IBMA, International Bluegrass Music Association, there in Raleigh, North Carolina, and that's where I met Corey. And because they had a booth there, kind of like they just did at the NAMM show, and I went over there and got talking to him, and he had heard of my dad's group and knew who he was and was familiar, and so that was good. And I said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about, in other words, the different you know uh, versions of that upright bass and all that, and talk to you about buying one because I want to take it to Europe. And so, like I said, we got into that whole conversation, and basically, I come out of there with one of those basses and a whole bunch of hats and shirts and swag, everything that you could give a guy, and then also one of the NS violins, And Corey was like, "Yeah, man, you need one of these too." And I was like, "Well," I said, "let me tell you something." I said, "Here's what I told him then." and this is God's honest truth. I said, I'm buying this, the upright bass for fly dates because I'm not 100% sure that my dad will even let me play this all the time, okay? Because of the traditional thing. And he said, I don't care if you play it every show or just once every once in a while. It don't make me no difference. And I said, okay. And then he kept on and he was wanting me to, endorse one of them fiddle, or, I call it a fiddle, a violin. And I said, well, I said, I definitely ain't going to even sort of get your hopes up on that because I said, I know that they'd run me out on a rail if I played one of those at a bluegrass festival, you know, for whatever reason, even still. So I said, I've already got a Yamaha silent violin that they've given to us and we've never used it. And I said, I just don't think I'll be able to ever use it, unless we play a country festival, you know. And he said, well, that's good enough for me. If you can use it on a couple of them country festivals and get some pictures and stuff, I want you on to endorse one of them. And I said, okay, as long as you understand. In other words, I didn't want him to think, hey, I'm going to play this fiddle every show. Because again, they ain't going to let me play it at some of these real hardcore,
Yeah.
uh, festivals in the middle of Virginia. They just ain't going to have it. So they've just now started where it's not a big deal, where a couple of these bands is playing these uprights and or an electric like this bass, and that's become almost sort of acceptable. But it depends on who you are. It depends on who you are to where if they give you a hard time about it or not. So, um, long story short is I went over to my dad and I've got all this equipment that they've just got from them, and I said, hey, man, I said, I'm going to endorse these basses and the fiddle. And here, go over there. They're going to give y'all some shirts and stuff and this and that and the other. And I said, Corey's excited, because I'm young and I'm doing a lot. And they're going to put money behind me and put me in advertisements and do all this stuff. And I said, what do you think about it? And he said, well, if they're going to kind of pay you and give you stuff and push you and do all that, he said, play it every show, the bass.
Yeah.
And I said, well, awesome. So I've played it every show since that day,
How long
every
has it
show.
been now? How many years?
Well, let's say 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Coming
Yeah.
up on 7 years, 7, 8 years almost, because it was a little before that, but I'm trying to keep on my timeline. But it's been 7 or 8 years because me and Corey was talking about it. And I mean, that's a lot of shows. And I've got probably 15 or 20 of their different basses. I mean, I've got the for years, I used the upright wave, the four-string wave series, because, I told him, I said, I love all of them, but I like using I don't want to say cheaper, but it is cheaper. In other words, the base model, BASE, not BASS, which is
Right.
the wave. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I said, the reason I would like to use that one is the same reason a lot of these big rock stars will use an Epiphone guitar. It's because they can take it and they can show people that they're young people that I'm trying to appeal to, or people that maybe not can't afford a $6,000 bass. You know what I'm saying? And because my point is that bass right there, I'd put up with any of the other basses they got because it's a workhorse
Yeah.
and it don't have all the fancy preamps and all that in it, but I don't need that because I've got a preamp on the floor.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? So I do have a couple of the CRs. I've got a couple of the NXTs. The NXT I have, I don't even never use the preamp. I just, where you pull the thing out and it energizes. I just use it in passive mode, just like the Wave, because that's the way all my gear is set up. So it don't. The point is, they sound like $1 million without all the garbage. You don't have to put thousands of dollars of stuff on them to make them sound that way. That's the whole point to me, to tell people is, hey man, this thing, because I mean, I've had people for years that have come up to me, man, what all have you done to them basses? What have you modified? They sound so great. I said, I took them out of the case and I played him. That's it. I mean, honestly, that's it. I use the Diodario collaborative strings that they do with NS, and I mean they sound like $1 million, man. And I mean, I just recently partnered with PJB
Well,
amplifier.
Jones,
Yeah. So
he's a
and they're
hoot, isn't he?
yeah, they're really pushing me a lot, and he sent me the little cube, the X4s, which man, I gotta tell you, he sent me like one in every color. He said, put one in the studio, put one in the bus, put one in the house. I mean, and then he sent me the one with the four speakers, for on stage with the extension cabinet. And I gotta tell you, man, that guy is another genius because I've never. I'm getting off subject from the previous question, but on the amps, I've never seen nothing or experienced nothing like them in my life, and I consider myself, for one, a lifelong musician that has done it professionally, like you said. For two, I'm an audio engineer. I do a lot of producing and studio stuff. And also, I'm a live sound engineer because of necessity. I didn't go to school for it. I learned, on the School of Hard Knocks and just by doing it. And I have fooled with some of these huge, huge, like where there's 64 line arrays per side systems. And then I've fooled with these ones that are just one Yamaha, 12-inch speaker per side and a sub and everything in between. And I can run any of them. And the point is, everything I thought that I knew about bass amplification, the PJB thing with the four little speakers, blowed me out of the water because of this. I always thought, if you had asked me before that, I always thought, and I've talked about people that's older than I am and that's been doing this all their life too. I'm good friends with the Kentucky Headhunters front of house sound engineer, um, and a bunch of different people that's done this way longer than I have. And everything I've talked to them about, we all kindly had agreed that basically, the bigger the speaker, the better it is for bass. In other words, like as far as a 15 is bigger punch and better than 12, and vice, on down the line. Well, I believe that because that's what I had experienced for a big full sound. But the more I have thought about this since I have been playing this PJB amp, because I went in there with a smaller amp. For years I used the GK 112. Okay. And it's decent size. It's not super heavy, but it's bigger than this PJB that I've got, substantially bigger. And basically, the PJB's louder. It sounds fuller. It sounds better. It cuts the mix better without being muddy. And it's more compact and it's lighter. So, I mean, in other words, it's the same thing that sold me on the NS, which is all that, sold me on the PJB. And I'll be forever sold on it because of what I just said. It's just, you can't argue with results. You know what
Well,
I'm saying? When you
big
can go into
combination
these,
still.
I set them side by side. I set the two amps side by side, and I told the artist relations guy at PJB, I said, send me the one you think I should have that is comparable to the one I'm using, and I'll check them out. And then if I like it, then we'll talk to you about doing the endorsement. But I never have endorsed anything that I don't play first.
Well, that's good. And that's a great combination, the NS and the PJB.
Oh, it's
Fantastic.
it's great. But in other words, somehow, John, those four small speakers, and it's, to me, it's the same technology, if you'll have it and hear me out, as line arrays. You know what I'm saying? And what I mean by that is the four small speakers versus one big speaker, it it shoots it somehow farther out to the crowd, and it cuts the mix better without getting muddy. That is what is so cool.
Talking to David Ellefson one time from Megadeth, and
Yeah.
he said something very similar. He was talking about 8-inch speakers with Megadeth, and he plays a five string.
Yeah.
Wayne, we're kind of getting to the end of our time here.
Yes,
You
sir.
such a great story. There's so many other things I could ask you about, but I've got time for one more question.
Okay.
I know in addition to a bass player, you are a fiddler and you probably dabble with a few other instruments as well. But what would you be if you were not a bass player? Something outside of music, if you can imagine.
Oh boy. I really don't know, John. I've never had nobody ask me that. I don't even know. I'd be sitting here pondering on it probably longer than the interview'd take to finish up. I've never imagined doing anything other than music. So I really don't know, John. I hate to not answer that. Um, I just don't know, brother. I've never. What a similar answer to a similar question would be, I've always done the bass and the fiddle, and I recently started doing more, which I've always played guitar, but I recently started playing more sort of country guitar with this thing that me and my wife done this
Tammy Wynette, and
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
wanted to ask you about that too. We,
And
yeah,
but in other words, that has been really cool as well, and similar to what I told you about getting to the bass, just going back to the acoustic guitar, which I've always played but never professionally on stage. And it's just a whole new challenge. I've played electric guitar on stage. That's a cool challenge. All these things are just, it just keeps things exciting, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And not that I don't get excited about the other stuff, because I still do. But these new things are just really cool. And I did want to leave you on this. I think it's very important because you said, when you was talking about me playing the upright NS with the bluegrass, it's not the obvious choice. Well, I just produced this, Alyssa and Wayne, George and Tammy record that we done our debut album, and it's a country album, not bluegrass. So typically people would think that we would have one of these, which I do. I've got 3 or 4 radiuses and I love them. I just used one on a jazz record that I'm producing. And Corey and them guys, they know that I love the radius too. But I use the NS upright. I think that's a good note for people because nobody would ever expect it. I use the NS upright, and I done the bass on that George and Tammy record. And it was featured in People magazine. It's got multiple videos, over 1 million views each of them. It's been on 5 or 6 of these, whatever you want to call it. In other words, best of 2023 list, Spotify, different one. So in other words, it's been really acclaimed in the industry, which is so encouraging. And I've had, the original songwriters from them songs reach out to us and just say how great and how much that they like the new cuts. So what I tried to do with this, John, was make I didn't want it to sound exactly like it did back then. I used vintage equipment and vintage preamps that would have been comparable to the same time frame that they were cut originally. But
oh,
I also use modern equipment in the studio, uh, hence the NS bass, because I wanted the upright punch, but I also wanted the sustain of having it plugged in, like we were talking earlier. And in other words, I've really had a lot of praise of using that, and I've always been sort of famous for um, throwing in things that people might not think would work in certain situations. You know what I'm saying? Like for an example, I had a guy playing the piano on that record that is a very famous death metal. Uh, he don't even call himself a pianist. He calls himself a keyboardist. You
yeah.
know. But I talked to him and I said, "Man, can you play country piano?" And he said, "Well." Because I found out from talking to him that he was a fan of George and Tammy, and I about had the record finished. And he said he was, and which is very odd because I mean, if you look at this guy, he's an odd looking, gothic looking character of a dude, real great dude, super nice guy, but just not like you said, not what you would expect as a typical George and Tammy fan. And so I thought same thing I did about the bass. That's why I wanted him on there because I wanted people in that metal industry to say, "Hey, a guy like me that likes George Jones and Tammy Wynette also appreciates heavy metal," and then vice versa. And I think that's so important, John. No matter what instrument you're playing, no matter what capacity that you're in the music business, whether you're in it just to have fun, whether it's a hobby, whether you're doing it all the time, it's just so important, I think, to respect a broad spectrum of genres. And just like me, my favorite thing's not opera singing. Okay, it's not my favorite thing to just listen to, but do I I can't even imagine the talent that it takes to do that. And then I respect the craft of that because I can't do it. You know what I'm saying?
You
So,
tried?
well, I mean, not really, but I would suspect not. You know what I'm saying? It's just like you said, it's so, and I love that. I love exploring, like you said. And I didn't know. I told my brother that co-produced this George and Tammy album with me. I said, because when you do something like that, John, people expect a certain thing. You know what I'm saying? Because nobody, this is a interesting thing. Nobody's ever done a George and Tammy tribute album that has been commercially released except for this one. Now
Beautiful.
that I could not believe that. My guy at Sony told me that before we done it, and I didn't believe him. I went on Google and searched and searched and searched. I just couldn't believe that of all the country artists. Now there's people that's covered their songs like as singles, but not an album. And
Is
so
it out yet? It's been released, right?
dropped last September. Yeah.
Okay.
And
And
we dropped two singles, and then that prompted us to drop two more. We were only supposed to drop two. And then we put out four music videos, and Sony put it out on their Orchard subsidiary label and through SGM. And it's been a great album. And like I said, I played the upright on it, which I'm super proud of. And like I said, I got to tell you, all I did was plug the bass into the preamp and record it. That's
it's
it.
called A&W, right?
A&W. Yeah. Alyssa and Wayne Brewer
You
sang George and
forget it's called A&W. It's not called W&A.
Tammy. Yeah, A&W. I always tell them like the root beer.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
it's so great. You've got such a great story, and there's so much more we can get into. But we've been going for quite a while here. I think we'll put an end to it, and we'll open it up
Absolutely.
to a follow-up interview. And there's so much more we can get into. So thanks so much. Thanks for being part of it. Your first time on For Bass Players Only. Very exciting. Great
Yes,
to
sir.
have you. Thanks so much.
Thank you
You're
so much.
watching for BassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. If you've ever wanted to learn bass, you should know that right now there are thousands of people inside the For Bass Players Only community, a lot of them over 50, learning bass, having the time of their life, playing the music that they love. Come join them and experience that incredible transformation for yourself. For BassPlayersOnly.com, you're never too old to groove, so let's play bass. Thanks again to my special guest, Wayne Brewer. I will see you all right here, same time, same place next week. In the meantime, once again, let's play bass.